Okay, this is Larissa Walren for PIDP 3230 Evaluation of Learning, assignment number 3, Informal Assessment Technique. I'm going to talk about preconception misconception check, but first I want to say a couple of things about assessment in classroom in general. Assessment in your classroom is meant to be often, have feedback, and be mutually beneficial. We know from physics that observation changes both the observer and the observed. By putting your students under a little bit of a microscope with your assessment, you give them the chance to show what they're learning, learn in the process, and then you know how well they're learning and you can tweak your process as you go along with the class. It helps you get to know your students a little bit better. The misconception preconception check should be administered in the form of a short quiz that is simple and anonymous. Either multiple choice questions or short answer. But again, if you're using short answer, make sure you tell the students you're not going to be able to recognize their handwriting. It's something you want to do early on if you're going to use it like that. Otherwise, multiple choice is the best way to do it. You're using this particular assessment technique in context of a class where you know the content might be a little bit controversial. The class that I'm teaching is teaching things that are very outside mainstream. I know that students might come in thinking that they think they know some things, they know some things. I want to know what those things are in the beginning so I can deal with it right from the get-go and maybe, again, tweak my class depending on who knows what and what they're thinking. So the limits of this one are that it takes time. You have to write the quiz, administer it, collect it, look at the data, correlate the data, and then figure out what feedback you're going to give to them. The advantages are that it promotes self-awareness. Self-awareness is where learning really happens. If you're bringing your students into a heightened state of self-awareness, they're going to learn with more profound depth, and it's going to be something that can potentially change them for life. It can be transformational. We talked about limitations, advantages. For your best practices, again, your questions need to be fairly simple, and you don't want to be patronizing or obvious or threatening or in any way. Again, you want to make sure that your students can answer the questions honestly with anonymity. You're also going to want to make sure that you are anticipating the potential feedback or pushback that you might get. So when you're first developing your quiz, you want to figure out what are people likely to push back about within this. Make your questions based on that and be prepared for whatever answers might come from it. You're going to want to give your feedback as quickly as possible. So you give the test, you take it back, you look at the answers, you figure out, okay, some people answered this way, some people answered that way, and that's how you give your feedback. You give it as anonymously as possible. It's an everybody kind of thing. It's not for marks. There's not meant to be any pressure on it. And you're going to want to, again, do that as quickly as possible so that you can start your day, start your class with this knowledge already factored in. Okay? And so we've talked about the strategy, we've talked about the context and the limitations, we've talked about the advantages, the best practices. Generally speaking, our references for this one were, Merriam-Webster. We're going to write this down on a piece of paper for you as well, or hand it in. And Evaluation of Learning, obviously the textbook, and Levy's 2018 book about physics is also a big part of this one. And so again, if you're going to use this technique, make sure that it's anonymous, make sure that it's simple, and make sure that your students know that it's just to find things out and for you to get to know them so you can teach them with the most efficacy and efficiency as possible. Again, your assessment is meant to be mutually beneficial. You want to be curious about your learners. If you have any questions about this, the textbooks are out there. It's a great way to learn about your students and teach them at the same time.